Hi, everybody. Welcome to our City Council briefing. I'm Miranda. I'm going to start with just some remarks here, but I have some colleagues. We've got a few updates to share with you. Today, I just wanted to give you a little bit of an update on some of the conversations that you are probably seeing out there about the Aquatics and Recreation Bond. Many of us are seeking additional information, exploring some options about some of the budget constraints. We talked a little bit about that last week at last week's council meeting. And for me personally, I'm a proponent of looking at some different options for budget constraints, just so that we can be really intentional and mindful with being able to deliver on the product or the projects that we're talking about with this bond. Beyond that, I kind of put my hat on looking specifically at how we got to where we are. This has been something that has been talked about not just with this current sitting council, but the councilors before us. And so a lot of the questions that I'm asking are related to the data that that the bonds or that the project is based off of. And so I've been asking some questions and have some concerns about that, but then also just some pause to continue to ask questions about the big picture of parks as a whole, right? We have a lot of really big, significant projects that will be coming online soon, and that our city, we get to embark on some facilities and some projects and just some opportunities for the community that we haven't before, and those are really big undertakings. So how the results of this bond would fit into how we do that as a community are some of the kind of thoughts or questions or concerns that I've had the opportunity to start digging a little bit deeper into. Specifically thinking about Frank Olson, if you spent some time there, that park and that pool is tired. I think that many of us know that, and I'm really proud that we're working towards something new and fresh in the Northeast and at Frank Olson. But the reality is that that's a really significant investment and would change the dynamics of the area. So some of the things that I've been digging a little bit deeper into and getting some more insight on is a traffic study that was conducted and a crash analysis. And so I'm optimistic about some of the information I've learned about where the parking lot would be located and just the different traffic there, but also asking a little bit more about the building design, what that would look like, the kinds of amenities and different things that we would be in there. So there's a lot of details in a project like this, and I'm sure that many of my colleagues have additional thoughts and questions and perspectives as we navigate towards continuing to take steps to try to bring these projects to our community. But I think the biggest thing for me personally, as I'm working through this, as I'm dialoguing with our staff and our planners, but then also my colleagues, is that there's a lot of details that go into a project like this, and working through those things, asking questions and understanding the process and the things that these are based on. I still have some questions and some concerns at this point. And so that's, I guess, what I would just share with everybody is these are exciting updates, but there's still more information and there's still more conversations to be had. I think that the wide array of meetings, the hours of conversations, and hopefully, last week's council meeting is a demonstration that many of us are putting in that time and asking those questions. So with that, we'll stick around for questions at the end, but I'd like to invite my colleague, Councilor Sigety, up for some updates on her projects.
Thank you. Hi, Jennifer Sigety, for Northwest District City Council. And I just want to talk about my public parking ordinance. I am going to be moving forward with that in the next couple weeks. Some of you may remember from October 22nd at the informational meeting. I talked about limiting the size of vehicles parking on 4 blocks of Phillips. This would affect from 9th to 13th streets. Basically, the ordinance would require a truck or a large vehicle, to not go over a line that Public Works will paint along the edge of the diagonal line. So I know many of you might be familiar as you go down there, and a large truck was sticking out. You have to kind of drive around the yellow line, the center line, to get around it, which is really obviously not the safest situation. So we have drafted this after an ordinance in Omaha. Rapid City also has passed an ordinance similar to this. It would affect 142 parking spots. There are about 4,000 public parking spots in downtown Sioux Falls, so there's still well over 3,800 places for people to park. We definitely want people to still feel very comfortable coming to downtown, shopping, eating, enjoying all the amenities that we have, but we want it to be as safe as possible for not only just general public, but obviously police and fire, and we just want to limit the danger of having those big vehicles out onto Phillips. So with that, I'll also stay and answer any questions anybody has after my colleague, Councilor Sale, comes up.
Thank you, Councilor. Just a quick update a little bit on the pool bonding that you're going to see coming forward. Through conversations with the finance and leadership of the council, we're going to really kind of split the thing up into three parts as we go forward. It's going to be the total cost will be one part. We're going to have discussion on that, and cost constraints, as Councilor Basie talked about. The second part is going to be the $3 million that it was going to be asked for to go into upgrade for the West Side Recreation that's currently Sanford Pool, and get an actual scope of work for that, what's going to be done. The third part will be to whether or not the City Council wants to borrow the $9 million to put back in our fund, which we use to pay for the West Side Pool. Well, we had that cash, so we wrote them a check. Maybe Venmo or something like that. I don't think they actually did the check, but they sent that money over. So the administration would like us to put that money back in our general fund. I personally oppose that going forward, because that's the kind of money that we took out when we did the 6th Street Bridge, the overrun. We took that project, put it on the back burner, not important at that time to do that. So those are the three things that you're going to see coming forward. We're going to discuss it tonight at the informational. We're going to have some votes coming up the week after that and the week after that to see if we can get the resolutions done so we can direct the bond council to write the ordinance the way it has to be done. It gets a little bit cumbersome when you start amending a bond ordinance, because the bond attorney wants it done a certain way to get it to the market. So that's where we're at. We got a great bond rating. We don't think it's going to be any problem selling the bonds in the market, and then we're going to start holding that money. One thing that I've asked from the finance is, I said, I want a total cost for these facilities. We've talked about $47 million for Frank Olson. That's the borrowing. That's not the cost. And the cost is not being included in that $47 million, would be demolition and other things along with that. So what I've asked them to provide for us is the total cost of these things going forward. And I'm pretty sure we're going to get an estimate on that. Some things not being known, but like the finance charges on this $47 million, if you borrow a house, they're going to put charges and fees on top of that. We borrow the money, there'll be charges and fees too. So the council's asked for all those details, and we'll get them in the next couple of days. That's all I really wanted to update you on, but the two councilors are here to answer questions, so fire away if you have any questions.
Okay. I didn't realize Councilor Sales here. Question on the pools. Do you have like numbers in mind that you're hoping to hit? Or when you say that 47 million, that would be the borrowing amount. Are you hoping that the city can come to you and say, okay, we can build the pool for, 35 million, and then it's the demolition and the financing and all that, and then the total cost is 47? Can you help me kind of understand like what your goals are as a councilor in seeing all this information?
That's exactly what my goal is. Tell me what the total amount is going to be. And whether it be 35 to build, demolition, financing fees, tell me what that's going to be. I would prefer the bond to specifically limit how much they can spend on each facility. There has been it just happens that Elmwood Clubhouse is a perfect example. We were told in the budget it'd be $4.2 million. We set that money aside in the budget. Ends up being over $7 million by the time you get everything involved. That's what my goal would be in our resolutions, to say, this is all the money you get to spend. Don't come back in 6 months and say, oh, we forgot to put in a sprinkler system, or oh, jeepers, now we need to put in refrigeration. Give me that figure. That's all the money you get to spend. Engineer it from that figure backwards. That's what I'm requesting the administration to do on these things, instead of telling us, we're not even done with the plan yet, so how much are we going to know it's going to cost? Well, not everything we build has to be the Taj Mahal. That's my goal in this. Now, you can ask the other councilors what they'd like to see too.
I think a point of clarity, just to make sure we're all on the same page. When we talk about whether it was the 77 number that was thrown out, the 68 number that we've recently thrown out, the conversations that we've had and kind of the education about the process is that when we're talking with finance, that number is referencing a net proceeds. So to Councilor's sales commentary, asking what is the total? So what is our service? What is everything? Those are numbers that we're asking for and that I think will help us be able to put those constraints in. I'm also, I think I mentioned it earlier, a proponent of putting in some guardrails. I'm cautiously open to the idea of it being a little bit of a scale of some sort of range, but that's something that I want to understand more about and learn, why those things are necessary or how that would relate to the bond package as a whole. So I'm cautiously open to some sort of sliding range or scale, but constraints for sure on each project and the project as a whole, not just to build, but to demolish and all that stuff.
That in the draft ordinance, there's ranges on the total cost of each project. Are you happy with those ranges?
In the draft ordinance that I last looked at, I have, one of the things that I don't have clarity on or that I'm asking about is how that figure or the percentage of the range was factored. I think that these facilities are going to cost what they're going to cost. And so to say if I'm happy with the ranges or not, I don't know that I know how to exactly answer that for you today, because I'm kind of fixated on how did we get to what that range what the range proposed is, how did we get to that number?
The bigger question about data that I think that you're hinting at, or when you're talking in the other meetings, what I'm understanding you to say is you're not clear on what the need is, right? What people want out of recreation. Is that a fair and accurate representation of what you're saying?
Yeah, so a lot of the conversations that I've been having with the Parks Department and getting some conversations set up with the consultants and things like that is the survey and the data that a lot of these projects are based on. It's based on a survey that our city does every 5 years. And so the data that we're working off of for these projects is from a 2019 survey. And so those are, I looked at, different kind of population growth and stuff of our city since 2019, and it's pretty significant, but then also recognizing that survey's pre-COVID as well. So those are some of the questions that I have is, how do we know that data is the right data that we should be working off of? And how do we know that these facilities are going to fit the needs of our community today and forward, as opposed to when we first did the survey?
Which begs the larger question, are we not ready to do this? We know the pools are old, but we are putting a recreation center in there. Are we at this point that there's too much uncertainty to commit to spending this money now when we know there's other recreation proposals, specifically the convention center or some of these other things? Is it possible that that recreation center will come out of there, you'll just fix the pools, and we'll move on to a bigger discussion about recreation because we don't know exactly what we want?
I think that's a really great question. And I think that in a lot of ways what you're articulating is some of the information gathering that I'm pursuing or that I'm seeking to be able to get some of that data and those studies, to have conversations with, the consultants and the teams that help us put those things together. What are they seeing in other communities when they're, looking at these surveys? How have other community data maybe changed pre or post-COVID, and modeling how we do things based on that if we don't have that survey, today's survey data or 2024 survey data. So I think that's a really great question.
Jump in there just a second. Patrick, the recreation center that she is referring to based on the 2019 data, do we need more indoor recreation space? It's a want of the community when you do that. The survey from the Parks Department also went farther to say, how should it be built, where should it come from, whether tax dollar or sales tax dollars, property tax dollars, or bonding. The question was not really asked in there. How much are you willing to pay for a membership? So that's one thing when we come back, and that as we talked about the west side recreation, how we're going to continue on that with Sanford, that was a big concern of the city council. Many meetings, Councilor Siggety and Councilor McCarris led that charge for us to do that. There has been numerous discussions, but no specific plan on total indoor recreation in the city. You talk about the possibility of the convention center to be an indoor space. Yes, that's a possibility. Years from now, that could happen. But there's also, as that checks off the box for square footage, it doesn't check off the box for locations. So those questions around town go on all the time on where we're at with that. As far as funding for that, it is entirely possible that if the city council sets the limit of spending for the Frank Olson, that some of the recreation stuff would have to suffer because of that. That's up to the administration to kind of figure that out and to sell us on that. So those things are all the things we're working through specifically with this too. The grand plan for indoor recreation, as far as how many square footage you should have in a population like ours for recreation comes from Parks Department National Studies. Well, I'm also thinking that all of these national groups will also tell you for a population of over 200,000, you should have 6 curling rinks. You should have so many tennis. You should have that. We can't hit every box for everybody going forward with the amount of money that we have.
Let me put this more flatly then. Is the recreation center in danger of not going forward? Do you think that we are at a point where it's possible that we're not going to do this?
I have not counted noses and asked for votes. There is a lot of consternation in the city council on what we do with the recreation part on Frank Olson. I don't know how the vote's going to come down. That's why tonight's informational, it is tonight, isn't it? Tonight's information is crucial. Also, the discussion that we're having in amongst each other is crucial too. I don't know if it's going to be axed out of it, but I think there is enough support in the city council to set a spending limit at this point. 2 years in a row, we've missed our mark when it comes to revenue for Sioux Falls. That's a $50 million hole in the budget because we're not going to get the grants that we're expected to. You start adding all that stuff up, there's some concern about revenues going forward for everything that we need to do in Sioux Falls. Streets and roads are a huge priority as we continue to hook up to Veterans Parkway along the way. Certainly we need to get Arrowhead Parkway and Veterans, we need to get that intersection done. So where all the money is going to come from, it's going to be a great question.
I do have a question on the parking thing, Councilor. Sorry.
Sure.
Can you talk about what kind of feedback you've received from the community since announcing this, and how it's gone over?
Thank you so much for that question. After I gave my remarks, I thought, oh, why didn't I mention this? It has been overwhelmingly positive since October 22nd at the informational meeting. I have received, I think, I've talked to other councilors. This is the most, certainly in the 5 or 6 months that the 4 new councilors that we've been on council, this is by far the most feedback we've received on any issue. And of course, there's a couple negatives. I mean, there's always going to be, but I would say 99% of the feedback we've had is, it's about time, are the words I've heard a lot. So thank you for that question, Megan. Yeah.
Is there a cost that people could potentially anticipate for it? I know there's, the cost of potentially painting those lines, but anything, that people who are going downtown could expect be transferred onto them?
The painting of the lines, I guess I haven't discussed. That's probably a fairly minimum cost. The city's going to have some discussions about signage and kind of letting people know. But the punishment, if you will, if the penalty for parking a large vehicle down there, if this passes, will be, it's already an ordinance. It's just a prohibited parking, so it's a $15 ticket. $15 ticket, unless you pay it late, then it doubles. Then I think it goes to $60 after a certain amount of time. So $15, and it will be enforced 24/7. So this isn't just when the parking meters are working. So this will be on the evenings and weekends too. The police department will be, if they so choose, they'll offer or give tickets.
What is the timeline for this?
We're looking at May 1st.
May,
So
okay.
if it passes, I'll introduce it, and we'll have a first reading coming up. I believe it's next week, and then 2 weeks after that will be the second reading, if it passes in a week. Then we'll do the second reading, and then it will be in effect May 1st, 2025, obviously. Thank you.
Have you adjusted your distances at all? Is it still the same?
It is the same, yeah.
Have you, the biggest pushback seems to come from guys like Kurt driving their F-150. It is the most popular vehicle in the land, and you wouldn't be able to park it there. So what is your message to Kurt and his ilk?
Well, Kurt, I've said it before. I'm going to keep saying it. It's 142 spots. It only affects 4 blocks on Phillips. All of the rest of Phillips, anywhere south of 13th, excuse me, and anywhere north of 9th, you can still park. There's all the side streets. We obviously have lots of ramp spaces. So there's still well over 3,800 spots that people can park. Kurt can park in downtown Sioux Falls. Sorry, Counselor.
I have one quick question about the 9 million. Sorry, to come back
Nope.
to the pools. Do you see right now, would it be better to separate those two issues? Get the 9 million, not have it in the bond. You've said that it should be 68 and not 77, but do we have any clarity since we last talked about the 9 million and how to reconcile that? Because it's a separate question at this point.
I believe that you'll see from the coming resolutions that basically it's going to come down to we will vote. Do you support the 9 million going into bond or do you not before the bond is written? So we'll have that discussion prior to the bond ordinance coming, so we don't have to amend it. The city attorney has given the council guidance on what we can and cannot amend in a bond ordinance. We certainly could amend that out at the last minute if we needed to, the second reading, but it just makes it so much simpler to know before we wrote it. So we'll have that vote as a resolution in a couple of weeks. Do you support borrowing another $9 million or do you not support it? So we'll have that vote publicly.
And to be clear, if you don't borrow the 9 million, it's not like we're going to give the wellness center back, but that Minnesota street project won't happen?
It won't happen as soon as they would like it to happen. So if it's a city, we've got $71 million in our reserve fund. So it's not like we're running on the red line and going backwards. We're still growing at almost 2% a year. So I've been around long enough to know that all they have to do is move a project from one year to the next, and all of a sudden, we've got a balanced budget again. And that's what's continuously going to happen. So if that 9 million does not come in to this fund, there's no guarantee that Minnesota Avenue is going to get done. When it was stopped to pay for the 6th Street Bridge, we were told by Public Works the piping was 40 months out. Did I get that right? I think that's 40 months out. So even if they had the money, they still have to order the pipe. They're not going to get it in. So that was one of the reasons that it was taken out. So they'd still have to order the pipe. They'd still have to do it. It probably won't get done immediately. It's not like a sewer line has broken. It's not critical. There's no emergency. Nothing's on fire.
And to be clear, if you took that question out of there, that takes time pressure off of the whole bond discussion, correct?
Takes some pressure off, right?
Yeah.
3 separate issues. Total cost for each of these facilities as they go forward, the $9 million, and a clarity on what $3 million worth of renovations at the West Side Recreation do. Those 3 separate priorities.
Is there a reason you wouldn't, and I don't, this might be an ignorant question, but is there a reason you wouldn't just bond those out it's as separate bonds or take them individually, just say, hey, we're ready to vote on Keene Park today, but Frank Olson needs more time, the 3 million needs more time. Why not just separate those out as different bonds?
Well, that's a great question. That's a great question. So if I can walk you back a couple of years, when we were having this discussion 2 years ago, the West Side Recreation was not even a consideration. So we, as a city council, had determined we need to redo Keene Park because it's old and failing and it's time. We need to redo Frank Olson because it's outlived its time. So what does that mean? Does it mean 2 more indoor pools? Does it mean 1 indoor and 1? That was the question we were having at that time. So the number less than 2 years ago was a $64 million bond for Frank Olson and included indoor recreation, for Keene Park redo with an outdoor. It also included at that time a redo of Elmwood Clubhouse and the park at McKinnon Park redo. That was all going to be included in a $64 million bond. So now here we are less than 2 years later. We've already paid for Elmwood Clubhouse. We've already paid for McKinnon Park to get those things going. And then all of a sudden it was a phone call or text or whatever. I don't know how Sanford came up with their offer. And I get a call from Don Kearney, hey, we got to talk about something's come up. Sure. And next thing you know, we can buy that for 25 cents on the dollar, a lot less than it would cost us to build an indoor pool so we can do all these things. So 2 years ago when it originally started, that's why we talked about the bond ordinance. We're on version number 10, and it hasn't ever come to a vote. I hope that provides some clarity on a little bit of the history.
Mine was just a clarification, but I think I'm starting through questions. I think I'm getting it. But the 47 is just borrowing what you would borrow, and then the 77 is if you borrow that other 9 million from that 68, correct? Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
I just had 2 questions for any of the counselors. One is on childcare. Are there going to be, any other actions taken after that second survey or study was done in September? Just kind of what the future on that looks like.
Yeah, I can address that. Yes, we have a working group that's been meeting fairly regularly, and as recently as last Friday, we had some discussions. And we just had another report come out that we've seen internally. I think we'll release that in the next few days. And yes, I can tell you that progress is being made. We're really hopeful that the city's going to come together or come forward with a plan that all the stakeholders will support and will end up helping families in Sioux Falls. So more to come on that for sure.
All right, nice. And then next is, I guess, just an update on Delbridge. Is there any clarification that anyone can give on kind of what the next?
Certainly, well, I've been told that there's several institutions that have expressed interest. The deadline to get in their letters of interest and what they could do is not here yet. When that, I believe it's the first part of December. I would have to get clarity on when that is, but when that comes, then it's going to go to the Delbridge Working Group and hopefully get to the City Council. I would sincerely hope that a couple of these groups, that natural history museums or universities, will come forward with a plan to take a lot of it away. Because the last thing I want to do is having me drive down there and put the warthog in my pickup and bring it back and put it in my garage and see what my wife says when she comes home. So we're hoping the whole group can go someplace. That's it. Thank you.